Chronopunk, a novel, episode 6. Here we actually go through quite of a whirlwind of action. So this is a mix of real action, entertainment, and then there's also some interesting scientific thoughts, I think, in this chapter. So this is really a mixed bag, if you will, between pure action and some deeper thoughts. We start with sort of transition from the last chapter. Simbi's dead. She got killed. Mounir hears about that, and that's pretty dramatic. And it happens in a very sort of breakneck pace. So that's part of what the author is trying to achieve here is to change the rhythm. So again, if we use MMA as a sort of metaphor here, it's the novel starts relatively benign. I think lots of thought, lots of interesting ideas, time travel, physics, science. The idea of sending somebody back in time, sending somebody into uncharted water, literally. So there's a lot of thought and, if you will, philosophy attached to it, and then the novel starts gathering pace, and this is akin to a fight where you have this moment of exchange and fists start rolling and takedowns, and so it's kind of similar to that. And we had also already in the previous chapter we had this increase of pace with the fight itself, and then later it continues with the news of Simbi and then Mounir's action. Right? This is there's a line in this chapter, in this episode, excuse me, where and this is how the rest of Mounir's life started or began. This is so you have this action pace, lots of things happening. And then your life is kind of, this part of your life is over. Now a new life starts, and it's really drastic. And we go through the action here. He escapes. He's being chased by a drug cartel. He escapes. The details are not important here, but the action and the feel. Hopefully, the feel comes across as how that feels for a human. And this is similar to Lenin's quote, sometimes nothing happens in 100 years and then 100 years happen in a week. So this is very similar here. Your life kind of happens relatively slowly, and then all of a sudden it happens very fast. And everything is wrapped around the concept of time in this novel. Chronopunk is a novel about time. And I hope it's the hope of the author that people at least think about the concept of time in a different way. And I think this episode 6 is a crucial episode in that context. It's a lot of things are happening because we get, a lot of explanations are given. What happened to Mody's parents? What happened to his dad? Why did he end up in Australia? How does a kid from Casablanca via UC Berkeley end up in Sydney? There's a short stint also in Iceland. That's important. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then Mody grows up in Sydney, and we have a continuation now. The pace slows down a bit towards the end of the chapter, because now we're back to Mody's childhood in Australia, the way he sort of walks through life, and his character is being built again. This is very, very important. Of course, we're building a character here, right? Fundamentally, the purpose of all of these chapters in the first 6 episodes has been to explain to the reader what's actually going on. We're in a time travel novel. The purpose is to go back in time to undo quantitative easing and stop QE and the shenanigans that came after that with all the corruption. And at the same time, we're also building characters, because we want to explain what these people are. These people who are actually in the story. These are not just robots. These are people. They have feelings, dreams, ambitions. And one trait that goes through the novel, I think, very clearly also with Mody and Lisa, and Mounir and Simbi, and we'll see that later on in the novel, is always the concept of excellence, the concept of the fight without the fight, the excellence, the mastery of the skill, the mastery of the craft, intellectually and physically. That's always center stage, and this comes across also in the character of Mody, who is growing up in Sydney as an MMA fighter. Now, let me say a few words about the Iceland part. So Mounir has this really action-driven experience after he loses his fight. His wife is killed. He finds his son. He runs away from the cartel, and he ends up in Iceland. Now, Iceland is in many ways a metaphor here. One, it's isolation. How do you run away from somewhere? You either isolate yourself in a big city amongst millions of people, or you actually go into isolation. He chooses the latter. Iceland is also, I think, a time capsule. It's a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that is happening. The tectonic plates, the planetary, scientific, visual dynamics are prevalent there. Like, it's not like you're in the Rocky Mountains or in the Nevada deserts or in the Alps where things look static, because it's been there for millions of years. Iceland is happening. So it's a good metaphor for time, and you can actually see time. You can see tectonic plates moving. You can see shifts. You can see dramatic, volcanoes. Everything is happening there. So it's a good metaphor for time. I think it's a nice place also for isolation. It's a beautiful place, and it's also the kind of place where you might want to find somebody in Mounir's position. So this is, when I visited Iceland, partly to do research for the novel, I did feel like this is the kind of place where I would run away from, because it has enough swag. It's enough. It's not. You're not a hermit somewhere living in the woods. You're still amongst actually very advanced people, but it's still incredibly isolated. So that's very. I think that's what's so intriguing about it. Leif Bjornason is the professor who is also featured at the beginning of this episode in Image. He is, there's a quote, herds are for sheep, you can choose your path. So he hires Mounir. Whether he knows what's going on or not doesn't matter, but this is the kind of renegade science, aggressive risk-taking feel that Iceland actually gives you. It's not the cutting edge of science. Nobel Prizes aren't won there, but interesting thoughts and interesting discoveries are made. Vikingur Olafsson, one of my favorite pianists, if not my favorite pianist, is a good example. We have Monsters of Man. So music-wise, the island has produced some very interesting characters. It's an artistic place, and I feel like Mounir fits very well. So he's on that island. He actually studies cosmological tectonics. So what we're trying to assess here from a narrative perspective is that there are two ways to study the trajectory of time. One is for non-living things, and the other is for living things. And the non-living things, they seem to have less randomness in their trajectories. And in the previous chapters, we spoke about the concept of, okay, what do we actually need to understand the trajectory of a rock? Most of the time, the rock does nothing. Sometimes something happens. By the way, that's reminiscent of what I just discussed in the beginning. Most of our lives are like that. Most of the time, nothing happens, and then everything happens in a very short period of time. So this is, again, something that permeates this novel. But interestingly, there's a difference between the time trajectory of a rock and the time trajectory of a human. There is more randomness, more serendipity with the human. What exactly that is probably the definition of life. And it's not clear what it is, but there's something. Mounir is studying the trajectory of non-living things, and his son is going to study the trajectory of living things and actually be part of such an experiment. Thank you.